Hi, in today's tutorial we're going to be looking at how to add colour to your drawings. We are making a picture of Winnie the Pooh and adding a bit of colour to it simply using food colouring. This is a fun and inexpensive way to try out watercolours and see if it's for you. If you would like, you can click on the link in the description below to download the step-by-step guide that I'm working through for this tutorial. To complete this picture of Winnie the Pooh, you're going to need a piece of cardboard. It's really important that you use cardboard and not paper because the food colouring will make your paper warp and bend. You're also going to need yellow and red food colouring, a pencil, a paintbrush, any kind of paintbrush will do, and then something to work as a palette. I'm using an ice cube tray today. Anything that's got little wells in it will do, and you're only going to need 2 wells, so you don't have to have something as big as this. I'm also using a scrap piece of paper to test my colours on before I paint them, and some paper towel to dab up any mistakes. The first step is to draw Winnie the Pooh, the outline of him, in pencil. Now, if you look at the step-by-step guide that is in the link below, I have some quick tips on how to draw Winnie the Pooh. What we're going to do is just start off with a circle and an oval. Now, the oval is going to be his body. Winnie the Pooh's body type is definitely potato. So you want to not make it too skinny and long, this oval. It's going to be a stubby oval. And I'm making it come out a little bit on the right hand side where his belly is going to be. So a nice oval, and then a circular shape on top for his head. Starting your picture with some basic shapes helps you keep your proportions correct. What we're going to do now is add a little bit of detail to the head. So I'm going to add 2 circles for his ears. His one ear is almost going straight up. So it's more of an actually oval shape than a circle. And then the ear on the right hand side is tilted down, so I'm going to make my oval tilt down on that side. We also need to draw in his muzzle here, and that's going to be like a lying down oval, and it needs to stick out from our circle. I'm just going to erase this. I made it a little bit too big. So keep an eye on the other parts that you've drawn. This muzzle shouldn't come out further than his ear at the top. So when you're drawing this oval here, just make sure it ends in line with the ear. That will give you an idea of how big to make it. Right, next we're going to plan out his arms and his legs. So he's holding his hands together on his belly. And that's just going to start in the top half of his body and curl around. I'm just drawing a little stick arm for now so that we can get the positioning right. And then his other arm comes out on the far side and they meet together in the middle. For his 2 feet, we're just going to draw a line coming down. And then the base of his foot. On the other side, you can see the leg does not come down as far. So it's from behind his tummy, so you're not going to draw the line going into the tummy. And you need to end it a little higher than the leg that you've just drawn now. And again, this the foot is kind of a teardrop, a lying down teardrop shape. Right, now that we've planned out where his arms and his legs are going to be, we can draw them in properly. But I think it's best to start where his hands are because they're going to meet there. And actually this far arm is easier to draw. It's kind of like a C shape or a back to front 6. Then we can draw the arm that's on the front side, letting the 2 hands meet together. Follow the curve that you've drawn. Now this arm is going to finish inside his body, so don't let it go past the body there. And we just are drawing almost like 2 sausages now. We'll add the shirt detail in later. You want to press quite lightly when you're doing this because you're going to need to rub out a few of these lines. Right, now we can add in our legs. Again, we're just going to add a C shape, a back to front C shape. The back of his legs are fairly straight. And then we have drawn that teardrop shape for his foot. So we just use that. Okay, and the back leg is very similar. Right, once we've added in the hands and the feet, we can draw his shirt now. So his shirt kind of comes up in this S shape. It's a horizontal S. So you can start, it's in the top half of his body, goes off his body a little bit, and you can lightly draw the S. It should cross over this arm and end just before the fold in the back arm. Okay, then it's a C coming up to where his shoulder is, and it goes out and comes in again. So there's just 2 folds in the shirt up there. Okay, and again, kind of an S shape around the bottom of his mouth. Don't worry if you can't get this right just yet. When we add more details to his face, you can fix it. So if you're not sure of yourself here, don't press too hard. Okay, now we're going to draw the sleeves of his shirt. So on his arm here, we've got this sleeve. It goes down further than his arm and comes back up. We'll do a bit of dark shading in there to show this shadow. Now when you're drawing the sleeve, don't make a solid line all the way around. You can make it solid till the base of his shoulder, and then just draw the lines as if there's a bit of a fold in the clothing. Right, and then we're going to do the far sleeve. That can also protrude slightly more than his arm. The top of the shirt will come out here. And there's also going to be a little bit of a shadow there where it meets his belly. Okay, we'll add more details to the shirt later after we've done our painting. Right, now we're going to move on to the face and adding some details to the face. So let's first get his head right. Going to go around the edge of it. The left ear is part of the face. There's not a solid line there, so I'm going to go around the ear. The right ear is behind his face from this angle, so we're just going to draw a solid line to cut it off. Now we're going to have to go slightly off the circle that we've used to draw his brow line. So I've come out of there, and I'm going to come back down at the point where the oval and the circle meet over here. And this is going to be his eye line. So later when we draw his eyes, we're going to use this line to get them in the right spot. Okay, now we're going to come out with his muzzle. As I said just now, you can use this line to get the position of his eyes just right. A little bit of a cheek underneath there. Then his eyebrows. His eyebrows should be in line with this line that's come out here. Have a little bit of a curve to them. Okay, now we're going to do his nose. I'm going to start with the actual nose, and you can see here it follows the shape of the muzzle again. It's just inside it. Once you've drawn the nose, then you can draw the bridge of the nose, and when it gets to the eyes, it curves back out. It shouldn't reach the brow line. Okay, then we can go down and draw his smile. There we have a basic outline for our Winnie the Pooh. Once you finish drawing it, just take a minute to compare your picture to the completed picture and see if there's any adjustments you need to make. So if I look at mine, I can see his brow line's not quite looking all right. So I'm just going to fix that a little bit. Right, I'm going to fix his tummy here. It's not looking quite the same. Needs to. His head also needs to be a little bit wider. Made the back of his head too flat. Okay, so these shapes just help us get the bones of our picture. You do need to go at the end and fix things that are not looking right. So I can see his head is not looking right. I'm going to make it a little bit higher and curve it around. So it's not very often that people draw things absolutely perfectly the first time they do it. You need to work on a picture and keep checking how you can change it to make it look more realistic or more like the picture that you're copying. Right, what I'm doing now is just erasing any of the planning or construction lines that I had. So those little sticks that we used for the arms and the legs, because we don't want those to be visible at the end. They were just used to help us draw the picture. Right, we're going to start with our colouring now. So first we're going to use the yellow for Winnie the Pooh's body. I'm just going to open up my food colouring and dip my paintbrush in. Obviously, if you've used this paintbrush for something else, you don't want to just dip it into food colouring that you're going to use for food. I'm just dipping it in 3 times, so I've got a good little blob of food colouring there. And I'm going to add some water to it. So if you don't add water to the food colouring, you get a nice bright colour, but it dries very quickly and it's quite hard to work with. So adding some water to the food colouring makes it spread easily and it slows down the drying, which means you have a bit more time to work with it. So I'm doing half water and half food colouring, so I'm now adding 3 drops. I'm going to mix it up, and again I'm going to just test it on the piece of paper that I have. So the colour is still pretty good, but it's much easier to blend and spread now. Before you start painting it, get a piece of paper towel ready, because what we're going to do is paint over it, and then in the spot here at the top of his head and in his belly, we're just going to dab some of the paint off and lighten it so we can get some dark and light shading in our paint. Right, you need to work quite quickly, so watch what I do, then pause the video and try it yourself. Don't try and do it and watch the video at the same time. Let's start with a smaller area that's nice and easy. So we're just going to paint his arms in. A smaller area will help give you a bit of confidence to learn how the paint works and how your paintbrush is spreading it. Here then, if you are still not feeling confident, you could go onto the legs. That's another small area. You can't just leave this for a long time and try and come back to it and paint over it. It's not going to work. Okay, I'm going to spread it out over my body now. You can see I'm almost outlining it first and then colouring it in later. And that helps me to get a neat finish. But you can already see some of this outline has started to dry. If this is happening and you're really battling, just dip your paintbrush in the water. The water will dilute it and help you spread it around. Okay, now I'm going to take my paper towel and just dab off a section here to lighten it slightly. And then I'm going to go and add some paint to his head. Again, use a bit of water if it's not spreading the way that you want it to. Okay, now I've added quite a bit of water to make mine spread, and it's actually made it lighter anyway, so I don't need to dab it off with my paper towel. But if your colour is strong like my belly was, you need to do that. Dab it with the paper towel to dry it off. If you think, oh, there's quite a big difference now between my head and my stomach, you could add a bit more water to that as well. So rubbing water over it will lighten it up, and then you can dab it with the paper towel. You just need to be careful of pulling a layer of the paper off. So if you start getting little bumps, I haven't gotten it on here yet, but if you notice little lumps on your page, you need to just stop, because you are tearing through the page and you're going to end up with a big hole in your page. So rather just leave it. You can see I'm just using a small amount of paint because we're painting a very small area. I don't want to just waste it. What I'm going to do is go back over this area here and make it slightly darker. So the back of his body and underneath his shirt, we're adding a little bit of a shadow there. If you do this too soon, the colors are just going to bleed into each other and you won't notice the difference between the light and the dark. I'm also going to use this to add a little bit more dark to the top of my page. Now usually when you're painting with watercolors, you need to use watercolor paper, which is quite a bit thicker. Because we are just doing 1 or 2 layers of paint here, we're getting away with using just regular cardboard. But when you're doing a full-on watercolor painting, you're going to be doing several layers of color, and then the cardboard is just going to get weak and wear through. So be careful not to go over the same area too many times because you will wear through the page. Now you need to give your picture a moment to dry before you add the red colour on his shirt. That's because if the yellow paint is too wet and you put red paint right next to it, the two colours are going to mix into each other. It's called bleeding. So what we want to do is give the yellow a little bit of time to dry before we add the red of the shirt. And the red of the shirt is of course our red food colouring. This is a slightly smaller area than the body, so even just two paintbrushes full of red paint will be enough. So I'm doing 1, 2, and I'm going to do 2 drops of water. So I'm doing equal parts of water to food colouring. Remember, the more water you add, the less vibrant or bright the colour will be. So I'm putting in 2 drops of water. Always test it before you put it on your page. So your little scrap of paper, do a line there. Now that's looking quite pink. If you wanted it to look a bit more of an orangey red, you could just add a dash of yellow. And in fact, I still have some yellow here. So I'm just going to put a little bit of yellow into my red, and it will change the tone slightly. Right, I think my picture is dry enough now for me to do the shirt. And we're just going to do a coat of red over the shirt. So I'm not going to try and do any shading or anything. The other thing to remember is that we're going to be adding detail with a pen later. So this is a really good way to get into watercolor painting, is to add detail with a pen. So it's just a bit simpler and easier as you get used to the watercolors and what they can do. Right, you can see I was a little bit impatient, and here the colors are bleeding a little bit between the head and the shirt. So that's an example of what will happen if you try and paint too quickly. This will be fine though, but we can just hide it with our pen later. So it's not the end of the world, but if the paint's really wet, it bleeds right up into the other color. Okay, we need to give this a good few minutes to dry properly before you try and draw over it with your pen now. And now that we've let it dry for a little bit, we're going to paint in the nose. So to make the nose, we're just going to make an orangey brown color. So if you just add a dash of the red to your yellow that you've used for Pooh's body, you should get an orange. Now you're going to need to test it to get just the right color. That's maybe too much red even. Because we're going to be doing some black pencil shading over this, it doesn't matter if you don't get a perfect brown. There we go, I've got my color, so I'm just going to paint it over Pooh's little nose. And while we're letting that dry, we can start shading the rest of Pooh's body. I'm just using a black pen to shade in Pooh. So you can start by just outlining things and then add in a couple of lines. That's called hatching, to add shading to your picture. So let's start with the legs. That's a nice easy spot to start. I'm not outlining in a solid line, but rather in several broken lines. Yeah, then I'm going to add a little bit of shading at the back of Pooh's leg. So it's just little lines, the hatching, a little bit of dark shading along the bottom of his foot. And let's do the back leg now. So we're doing a little bit of a broken outline of the foot. Because this back leg is in shadow, you're going to add quite a bit more dark shading to it. Right, I'm going to add a little bit more shading to this back leg here. Okay, then we can go around the back of his body. There'll also be dark shading here. These lines, you can just give a bit of a curve to the lines here so that his body looks more rounded. So straight lines will make things look flat, and the curved line will give it a bit more shape. You can see I'm turning my page to keep my hand comfortable, so you'll always draw a bit better when your hand is in a comfortable position. Doing a little bit of shading on this side, but not as much. Right, let's go around his arms now. Again, just go over the pencil lines that you drew earlier and a couple of curved lines along the bottom of his arm to give them a shadow. So I'm moving on to his shirt just because it's close. Some dark shading under his arm and his sleeve. There'll be a little bit of shadow from his arm over here. You need to make a point of drawing a little C here so that you can see that the hand is curved around. And then finally we can go on to his face. So start with the back of his head. Add in that ear. Again with the curved lines. I'm adding curved lines in another angle. Just a couple of small ones on the ear. So you can see that most of my dark shading is on the left hand side and it's slightly lighter on the right. So if you're shading something, just pick a dark side and pick a light side. You can see the shading on his ear is almost like a triangular shape, so it's wider at the bottom and gets thinner at the top. You can draw in his facial features, his little eyes. And hopefully by now his nose is dried enough that you can just draw your outline there. And again, a little triangle of shading on his nose. And there you have Winnie the Pooh. If you have any questions about drawing Winnie the Pooh, please leave them in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, please like it. And if this is your first time watching one of my videos, why not subscribe? I upload a new video every week. If you'd like to try out Piglet, we're going to be doing him next.